Hello, welcome to my first ever book review. I'm Stevie Lang, and today we are going to review one of my favorite books off of Royal Road, Downtown Druid by C.B. Titus. Um, if you don't know me, I'm Stevie, and thank you for stopping by the YouTube channel to watch this video. And if you do know me, thank you for watching the silly little vid of a guy you know reviewing a book. But today I want to review Downtown Druid. It's one of my favorite books off of Royal Road, and if you don't know what Royal Road is, it's a great website to find a bunch of free online books. And so the way I'm going to structure this book review is kind of into three sections. The setting of the book, the main character, and the plot, because at least for me, that's how those are like the biggest components to me. And so I guess we'll jump right into it. I really like to start with the setting because for me, those first few chapters where the author really sets up the world you're about to jump into is really important. And I really like to immerse myself in some settings that are, farther removed from our reality. The more sci-fi or fantasy it is, the more I feel like I can really enjoy it. And speaking of fantasy, that's what Downtown Druid is. It's a high fantasy kind of setting. It's um it's one of those books where the main fighting is done by, swords and bows, but there is uh blunderbusses and old muskets and stuff. And so the world they live in is expansive, but all three books, which is even though it's one series. It's technically in three books, but you're gonna catch me calling it one book. Um, it all takes place in one city called Renhold, which is it's a really cool city. At least the backstory of it. It's a city state amidst a world of nations, and it's been able to survive because of they just have a bunch of powerhouses of like nobility that had to flee their own country. And so they're powerful, but they're just like literally one little city state. Well, I say little, but it's apparently supposed to be like one of the biggest in city in universe cities, which I find really cool. Um so there's It's fantasy. Sorry for that pause. And so we have different races. You got the usual elves, orcs, and dwarves, which I consider like the big three of fantasy. You're not really doing fantasy, right? Unless you got those three. Um, they also have gnomes, and the other big race is changelings in this story, which I think is a very cool race to have and play around with. And it's very cool how they're implemented in the story because technically they are a fae. That's also a big, fantasy race. If you don't have, you're not really doing it right. Um, and the way they implement them is very cool. And I guess the most important part of the city when you're starting out is their maximum security prison called the Pit, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's literally a giant hole in the ground where they toss all the irredeemable criminals who have to serve life sentences. And I guess sort of like real prison, there's gangs. This is where our story starts, where we meet our MC, who I'll talk about in a little bit. But there's different powers in the pit, and whoop-de-doo, it's gangs divided by race. So I forget what all the gangs are called, but you got the orc gang, you got the elven kings, that's what the elf gang is called. You got the dwarven underground clan down there, and then you got something called the consultorium. I think I pronounced it right. I probably butchered that. But it's basically like a giant underground marketplace who's rumored to have a way out of the pit, even though it's supposed to be impossible. And the last gang, which is the most important because they're buddy buddy with the MC, is the Collard. And now the Collard are all like a really melting pot of races of wizards. Their common trait is that they're all wizards and they're all jacked as fuck because they're called the collar because they have a giant brass collar around their neck that takes away their ability to do magic. So instead of doing magic, they all get jacked as fuck. And I think that's actually like a pretty cool piece of world building. Like a bunch of like wizards who can't do magic just get jacked as fuck. I think that's pretty fucking cool. Excuse my language by the way, but there is gonna be more cursing. Um, so I guess that carries us to our MC, Dante's, uh, who I really like. I think he's one of the strongest point of this story of this book, and I really like him, and he's a great MC. He one of the things I like about him is that he's smart, but he's not genius. You know, he's not pulling miracle solutions out of his ass because the author had, you know, a week to think about it. Which is a really big pet peeve of mine when main characters make these crazy logical jumps and come to the correct solution or come up with a impossible plan to get out of a impossible scenario. Yeah, they have their moments, but sometimes their authors will spam those over and over again, and it's a big pet peeve of mine. Um, we're gonna go into slight spoiler territory later, but we're gonna do some slight spoilers now, and when we get to the plot section is when we're really gonna get a little more spoilery. Spoilery? Is that a word? Um, but anyways, Dante's is thrown in the pit because he does some bad stuff, obviously. uh, But he's a thug and he's very street smart. He was an ex-leader of a small-time gang up top, and now he's alone in the pit for reasons you'll hopefully find out when you read the book. But he's very street smart. He knows the ins and outs of prison and just gang life in general. Um, and it's very down to earth. Like it's not like I was raised in a dark alley by wolves. No, it's just like realistic. Um, the biggest uh plot point, I guess, or one of the biggest plot points in the kind of book one is that uh, as the title says, he becomes a druid, which I think is really cool because wizardry is common in this world, but druidry is not. And so they're kind of myth and legend, and so Dante's doesn't really know what he's become at first, besides being able to talk to a rat, which comes to another one of my favorite parts about this book, Jacapoo, who is, or I looked it up, it might be pronounced Yakapoo, but when I read this, it I pronounced it Jacapoo in my head. Um, who is a rat who becomes like almost MC number two, and Jacapoo is the boy. He is like just a chiller. I fuck with him super heavy. His main priorities are the three F's: food, fighting, and yeah, you could probably assume the last one. But he's funny. He's just a great addition to the story. And as the books go on, he actually becomes a very like fleshed out character for literally starting as a rat, which I think is really cool and one of my favorite parts about this story. What else do I have on my notes? Oh yeah, Dante's is relatable. I think that a lot of the choices he makes throughout the story, I could see myself making, or at least seeing the reader can relate to. He's not something you always have to be careful with in these gangster and gang stories is that the MC, you know, goes off his rocker and becomes just a cold-blooded killer. Dante's is not like that. I mean, he becomes like that at the endish, but like done in a good way. And book one and book two, he's definitely like very, very relatable. Speaking of transformations, he grows. He grows a lot. And that's also going to be a druid pun because he grows a lot of plants and shit, which is funny. But he's got good character growth, and I love to see his progression throughout the books. So I think that wraps up the protagonist section. Let's go on to the plot. Now, like I've been saying, the plot's split up into three books, and I've kind of titled each book by the main, at least like overarching arc in each story to me. Book one is Escaping the Pit, which, spoiler, he escapes the pit. Um, he, and it's really done in a creative way, which I really like. And it's a really good introduction to the story. I love the journey Dante takes to get out of the pit and how he really uses everything to his advantage. You get to meet a lot of cool side characters in the pit, and there's even one part right before the escape that is pretty emotional and got me tearing up a little bit. Book two is I've titled Revenge Against Mondigo. Mondego. Uh, I never really knew how to pronounce his name. Mondego. But anyways, trying to keep it as spoiler free as I can. Dante has to kind of take revenge against his old gang and his ex best friend Mondego, who um fucked them up. And so book two is all about him kind of like starting from nothing on the top side and really going up against um this gang that he created. And so the cool part of Renhold is that they have um obviously they run on nobility as most fantasies do, but they also have criminal power in the city, which is what this story mostly focused on. And the criminal underworld is dominated by the Five Fingers, which Mondego is one of the fingers. So, without going into too much detail, it's really cool how he deals with that problem and how he really sets up his own like base of power in the city. In book three, I just have labeled as climax. This I'm not even gonna talk about, but it was definitely the best out of the three books. There was so much to love about this. Such a great villain. All loose ends were tied up. All the side characters came back. Sad deaths or death, I think. Um, it really got me emotional. It was just all around a great book and a great climax and end to the story. I really enjoyed it, and that's what really brought this whole book series home for me and solidified it as one of my favorites. Now, For the past three sections, which is the setting, the protagonist, and the plot, I'm gonna rate them, but I'm gonna do one more setting, which is the writing setting, which I know some people care about. I'm not gonna rate that because I suck at writing, and I am the last person to judge someone else's writing, and I wouldn't even know what to look for with a critical eye. But what I will say about the writing is that it's a very good pace. It always keeps me interested, and I never really felt bored of it, you know. The worst part is definitely somewhere in book two where it just feels a little sluggish to get through, but then it picks up shortly after that. It kept me hooked, I guess, is basically the same point, but the beginning, I will say the beginning hooked me a lot, and I was really instantly sucked into this world with this Dante's guy. And another good thing is that it's completed. And I'm planning to do more book reviews in the future. Some of them will be for books that are not even completed yet, but this one is completed. So if you just want to read a book cover to cover, definitely recommend this one. So to wrap this up, I'm gonna rate each of the three categories out of 10 and then average them together to see what the overall rating is. Sorry, a little bit of a headache. So I'm giving the setting a 8 out of 10. And the reason I'm giving the setting an 8 out of 10 is because I really love this world. I really love the dynamics and power and all the cool races that the author set up. Um, the reason why it's not higher is because the whole thing takes place in one city, and I would have loved to explore more of this fantastic world they set up. Um, Next, I give the protagonist a 9 out of 10. Definitely the best part of the story. I'm gonna count Dante and Jacopo as the protagonists because they're really, you can't really separate them. And lastly, I'm gonna give the plot a 7.5 out of 10. Book one and book three are great, but it's book two that kind of drags this one down to the 7.5. But overall, really, really great plot. I really loved it. And so overall rating is about an 8 out of 10 or an 8.1 out of 10. Really great book. Cannot recommend it enough. Um, to the author of Downtown Druid, Mr. C.B. Titus, thank you so much for writing this. This was a really pleasure to read and a great work of fiction. Um, yeah, I hope. Thank you for watching. This is my first YouTube video, so please do leave a comment on what you think, what I could improve, what I could do more in my reviews. I kind of really did this review on the fly, and I didn't know what I wanted to review about a book or what a book review should be consisting of. So if you want to see something addressed in the next book review, please leave it in the comments. And I hope you have a good day.